Let's begin Chapter 22 with an overview of the immune system. We can split the immune system into two main parts. The first part is your innate immunity. This is the immunity that you are born with. It is basically the same in everyone, and it stays consistent throughout your lifetime. So the same in everyone means that it doesn't matter where you were born or where you grow up, every human has the basic same innate immunity. And consistent throughout your lifetime is the same when you are 5 years old and when you're 20 and when you're 50. It doesn't really change much. The other type of immunity is adaptive. This immunity develops during your childhood. You have a strong genetic component here, so everyone inherits a different adaptive immunity from your parents. And as it's developing during childhood, it adapts to your environment. So this one is unique to everyone, and your adaptive immunity depends on your genetics and where you grow up. We can also think of immunity in terms of lines. You have 3 lines of immunity. You use these lines in order from first to third. The first 2 lines occur in the innate. The first line is your barriers. The idea here is just to keep germs out. Germs can't make you sick if they can't get into your body. One of the best things I ever saw was a TV news report where it was this investigative reporter and he was trying to do this really scary story and drum up fear like the news media likes to do, where he investigated the bacteria on flip-flops. And he went up to a bunch of random people on the street and he swabbed their flip-flops and he rubbed that on the petri dish and grew it out, and then he went back to them a couple days later and said, "Oh, look at all this scary bacteria we found on your flip-flops." And most of the people were playing right into his little game and acting all scared and upset that there were so many germs on their flip-flops. There was one lady, however, that didn't seem to care at all. And he said, "Well, what can you learn from this?" And she said, "Well, I guess I just won't lick my flip-flops." Best response ever. It doesn't matter how dirty your flip-flops are. As long as you don't lick them, you're fine. Your barriers keep those germs out of your body. Most germs that do get in through a cut in your skin, your eyes, nose, or mouth. So one of the best things you can do to protect yourself from infection is keep your hands off your face, because your hands are dirty. They pick up germs all the time. But as long as your hands don't go near your eyes, nose, or mouth, where germs like to get in, the germs can't hurt you. The second line is your non-specific immediate response when a germ does get in. So remember, I said you use these in order. Most of the time your first line is working and the pathogens don't even get in you at all. But sometimes they do. Sometimes you touch your face, sometimes you have a cut in your skin, a pathogen gets in. That's when your second line comes into play. It's going to respond immediately to that pathogen coming in, and the non-specific part means it doesn't care what the pathogen is. It's going to respond the same way regardless of the species of the pathogen. The second line is split into 4 parts. You have cells, you have chemicals, fever, and inflammation. Then the third line is your adaptive immunity. This is a delayed specific response to a pathogen that has entered your body and is making you sick. It's because this line is specific that makes it delayed. The specific part means that it does identify the pathogen, then create a custom response to that pathogen. This is what causes the delay. You spend a week or two identifying the pathogen and making your custom response. But then, once it does get up and going, this is your most powerful weapon. This is also what makes you immune to reinfection by the same pathogen. So here is the overview of the immune system. The next few notes will go over more detail of each of these things. In this video, we will go ahead and do the first line, the barrier. So the idea of your first line is to keep the pathogens out. Remember, they can't make you sick if they can't get in. You have several components of your first line. Skin is your biggest one. As long as you have intact, healthy skin, that goes a long way to keeping infection out. I have a friend whose son was in a class with a teacher who was obsessed with hand sanitizer. This teacher was always making all the students put on hand sanitizer several times a day. And those sanitizers are made of alcohol, which is very drying to your skin. Well, these kids, because they were rubbing so much drying alcohol on their skin several times a day, it dried their skin out and made it crack. And then all these kids had infections in their hands because their skin was all cracked and germs were getting in. Another one is your mucous membranes. Remember in chapter 21, we talked about MALT, that lymphatic tissue found in your mucous membranes. Well, here we are looking at that again. These are what guard the entrances to your body. Stuff has to get in and out of your body. So there are places where you don't have skin creating a barrier. So this would be the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the urogenital. Okay. You also have on your skin hair. This is especially important in the nose. The nose is full of hair. That nose hair is very important. It's a filter for the air. You have secretions. Here you can see this above the eye, if you remember back in chapter 16, is the lacrimal gland. It makes tears. This is a salivary gland. And all over the skin, you have sweat. Tears, sweat, and saliva all contain lysozyme. This is a chemical that your body makes to inhibit pathogens. If we look here at the baby's stomach, the stomach is full of acid. Acid is really good at killing pathogens. Food is not clean. Every time you eat food, you're eating germs. But you don't get sick every time you eat because the acid in your stomach destroys those germs. Also remember, we've talked about before, the mucus in your airways is trapping pathogens from the air and keeping those pathogens out of your lungs. Then you have cilia that sweep that mucus up to the back of your throat where you swallow it and your stomach acid destroys it. Here you can see in the intestines you have a lot of bacteria. This is called your microbiota or microflora. The average adult has about 5 pounds of this microbiota in your intestine. And these are friendly bacteria. Not all bacteria are pathogens. There are more bacteria that help us than hurt us. And this is an example of bacteria that help us. So they help to digest your food. They make vitamins for you. And they protect you from pathogens. As long as your intestine is full of these friendly bacteria, there's no room for a pathogen to move in. A lot of times, intestinal infections occur after someone has been on an antibiotic. If you take an antibiotic, you kill off these good bacteria in your intestine. Then you have empty space, and pathogens can come in and take over that empty space. You especially see this a lot in kids. A typical scenario, a little kid gets an ear infection, they go get an antibiotic, then they start having diarrhea. This is why antibiotics can cause diarrhea. It kills off those good bacteria that are protecting you. So here's a basic overview of your main barriers. These are the things that are keeping the germs out of your body and keeping you sick or keeping you healthy most of the time. If you didn't have these barriers, you would always be sick.